Have you ever worked the late shift, that strange, quiet time when the world outside seems to fall asleep and you're left alone in a building that feels completely different than it does during the day? I used to be a janitor at an old city library, a beautiful, sprawling place with high ceilings and endless rows of books. I loved the peace and quiet, or at least, I did. It started subtly. A book falling from a shelf in a distant aisle. I'd chalk it up to gravity, a poorly placed book finally giving in. Then, faint whispers, like the rustle of turning pages when I knew for a fact I was the only person in the entire three-story building. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just the old building settling, my mind playing tricks on me in the silence. One night, I was polishing the grand wooden circulation desk on the main floor. The only light came from my cart and the dim emergency lights that cast long, eerie shadows. I heard a sound from the second-floor children's section. It wasn't a whisper or a falling book. It was a giggle, a small child's giggle. My blood ran cold. I grabbed my heavy-duty flashlight and slowly made my way up the wide, creaking staircase. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling. "Is anyone here? The library is closed." The only answer was the echo of my own voice. I swept the flashlight beam across the colorful little tables and chairs, the picture books neatly arranged on low shelves. Nothing. I was about to dismiss it as my imagination again when I saw it. On a small, round table, a picture book was lying open. It was The Giving Tree. That was strange, because I had personally straightened up that entire section not an hour earlier. Every book had been put away. I walked over to the table. As I got closer, I noticed something else. A single, small, muddy footprint was on the floor right next to the chair. It looked fresh. It was impossible. All the doors were locked and alarmed. I was the only one with the keys. My heart was pounding in my chest. I slowly closed the book and put it back on the shelf, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a coworker had left it. Maybe the footprint was old and I just hadn't noticed it. I quickly finished my work upstairs, my ears straining for any other sound. The silence was heavier now, more menacing. I headed back down to the main floor, eager to finish up and get out of there. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze. Standing in the middle of the grand lobby, silhouetted against the moonlight streaming through the tall arched windows, was the figure of a small boy. He was pale, almost translucent, wearing old-fashioned clothes. He just stood there, staring at me with wide, dark eyes. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. My flashlight was pointed at him, but the beam seemed to pass right through him. He didn't look scary, just sad. He slowly lifted a hand and pointed towards the main entrance. Then, as silently as he appeared, he faded away into nothing. It took me a full minute to get my legs to work. I stumbled towards the main entrance where he had pointed. The massive, heavy oak doors were chained and padlocked from the inside, just as I had left them. But lying on the floor, right in front of the door, was a single, worn leather shoe. A child's shoe. It was covered in the same mud as the footprint upstairs. I never went back. I called my supervisor the next morning and quit, making up some excuse about a family emergency. I later found out through an old newspaper archive that a little boy had gotten lost in a snowstorm in the 1920s. He'd tried to take shelter at the library, but couldn't get in. They found him the next morning, right on the front steps. Some stories aren't just in the books. Sometimes they walk the halls. Thanks for listening. It started subtly, almost comically, a wrong number text that said, "Hey, saw you at the coffee shop today. You looked great." I laughed it off, replied wrong number, and didn't think twice. But the next day, another one came. "That blue scarf really suits you." I was wearing a blue scarf. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I blocked the number. The next day, a new number. "Blocking me won't work. I can always see you." I tried to ignore it. Maybe it was a prank, a sick joke from someone I knew. I started looking over my shoulder, scanning faces in the crowd. Every person I didn't recognize became a suspect. The texts became more detailed, describing what I was eating for lunch, the book I was reading on the subway, the song I was humming as I walked home. It felt like a pair of invisible eyes were glued to me, every second of every day. One evening, I was home, windows locked, curtains drawn. I put on some music, trying to drown out the paranoia. A text buzzed on my phone. A new number, of course. Love this song. Good choice. I froze. The music was only playing inside my apartment. How could they hear it? I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet, my heart hammering against my ribs. I crept through my own home, checking every room, every closet, under the bed. Nothing. The text stopped for a few days. I started to breathe again, foolishly thinking it was over. Then, a package arrived. It was a small, unmarked box. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of cotton, was a single, perfect photograph of me sleeping. My bedroom window was slightly ajar in the picture. I hadn't left it open. My blood ran cold. The photo was taken from inside my room. I called the police. They were sympathetic but said without a direct threat or a suspect, there wasn't much they could do. Change your locks, be vigilant, they advised. I felt completely alone, trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. I moved in with my sister across town, changed my number, deleted my social media. I tried to erase myself. For a month, there was silence. I started to feel a semblance of normalcy. Maybe I had finally escaped. Then, one morning, my sister handed me her phone, her face pale. This was sent to me, she whispered. It was a message from an unknown number. Just one sentence, but it was enough to shatter my fragile peace. I know where you're hiding. Tell her I miss our song. I realized then that this wasn't just about being watched. It was a game to them, and I was the unwilling player. The stalker wasn't just following me. They were enjoying my fear, feeding on it. They were closing in, and they wanted me to know it. The fear wasn't just that they might hurt me. It was the terrifying reality that they were already inside my head, controlling my every emotion, turning my life into a prison of constant anxiety. The most terrifying part of this whole ordeal, I still don't know who they are. I look at every stranger on the street, every new face at work, and I wonder, is it you? The silence is no longer a comfort. It's a suspenseful pause, a breath before the next chilling message. They could be anywhere, anyone. And they're just waiting for the right moment to remind me that I can run, but I can never truly hide. Thanks for listening, and remember to always trust your gut. Stay safe out there. They say you should never disrespect the dead. I guess my friends, and I had to learn that the hardest way possible. It was a dare, of course. Spend a night in Blackwood Cemetery, the oldest, creepiest graveyard in our county. The stories were legendary shadows that moved on their own, whispers on the wind when there was no breeze, and the infamous weeping woman statue that was said to cry real tears on moonless nights. We arrived just as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, armed with flashlights, a cooler of sodas, and way too much bravado. The wrought iron gates groaned open like something from a classic horror film. Inside, the air grew still and heavy. Tombstones, weathered and leaning, looked like crooked teeth jutting from the earth. The silence was the first thing that got to me. It wasn't just quiet, it was a hungry, listening silence. For the first hour, it was all jokes and laughter. We dared each other to read the oldest inscriptions, trying to spook one another by jumping out from behind mausoleums. My friend Leo, always the skeptic, even went up to the weeping woman statue and tapped it on the cheek, saying, "Hey there, beautiful. No tears tonight." That's when things started to change. A cold gust of wind swept through the cemetery, extinguishing the small campfire we had managed to start. The temperature dropped so fast you could see your breath. Our laughter died in our throats. We relit the fire, but the mood was broken. Then came the sounds. A faint rustling in the bushes, just beyond the reach of our flashlight beams. We told ourselves it was an animal, then, a soft sobbing sound. It seemed to come from all directions at once. We all looked at the weeping woman statue. In the flickering firelight, her stone face seemed contorted in grief. And that's when Sarah screamed. She was pointing at the statue's eyes. A dark liquid, like oil or old blood, was trickling down its stone cheeks. We froze, our hearts pounding against our ribs. Leo, who had been so smug just moments before, was pale as a ghost. "It's just water," he stammered, his voice trembling. "Condensation or something," but we all knew it wasn't. That's when my flashlight beam caught something. A shape, standing by an ancient oak tree at the edge of the cemetery. It was tall and impossibly thin, a silhouette darker than the night around it. It wasn't moving, just watching. I couldn't make out any features, but I felt its gaze on me, cold and malevolent. I tried to speak, to tell my friends, but the words were caught in my throat. Then, the whispering started. It wasn't on the wind anymore, it was right beside our ears. My name, it was whispering my name. I spun around, but no one was there. My friends heard it too. Their own names, hissed in a dry, ancient voice. Panic took over. We grabbed our stuff and sprinted for the gates. We didn't look back. The sounds of sobbing and whispering followed us, growing louder and more desperate. The cemetery gates, which had been open, were now shut. We rattled them, screaming for help, but we were alone. A heavy, rhythmic thudding started behind us. Thud, 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 like something heavy being dragged across the ground. Slowly, we turned. From the darkness near the weeping woman statue, a figure was emerging. It was hunched over, dragging a shovel. Its face was a blur of shadow, but its eyes glowed with a faint, pale light. Leo, in his terror, tried to climb the iron fence. As he reached the top, something unseen seemed to grab his ankle and pull. He fell back inside, landing with a sickening crack. The figure with the shovel was getting closer. We didn't wait to see what happened next. Sarah and I threw ourselves against the gate with all our might. By some miracle, the rusty lock gave way, and we burst out into the night, leaving Leo behind. We ran without stopping, the sounds of his screams mixing with the mournful sobbing from the cemetery until they both faded into the distance. We never saw Leo again. The police searched the cemetery, but all they found was his abandoned flashlight near the weeping woman statue. We told them what happened, but they just looked at us with pity, thinking we were traumatized kids making up stories. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. Some places aren't meant for the living, and some dares are better left unanswered. I still have nightmares about those glowing eyes and the sound of that shovel dragging through the dirt. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in Blackwood Cemetery, and I can hear it whispering my name. Thanks for listening to my story. If you enjoy Tales of the Unexplained, be sure to subscribe for more. Stay safe out there.